Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. This is the Smoking Barrel. I'm Rustin Edwards, based in Zug in Geneva, with my illustrious co-host, Mr. Matt Stanley, in the temperate Middle East in Dubai.
Yes. Are you in Zug or in Geneva?
Location unknown at this time. I'm split
Zugiva.
between two houses.
Zug. Fair enough. No,
Wednesday,
greetings.
we're in Geneva. It's Wednesday.
Wednesday, right, there you go. Yeah, no, hello. We sorry we couldn't come at you last week. There were technical difficulties. We did try, didn't we?
Yes. There were a bit of internet issues, so unfortunately, we weren't able to put a podcast together. You gotta have that good internet speed to get that nice, fluid video and vocals, and if we don't have that, we can't put something together.
No, exactly. But no, I'm good. Ramadan Kareem again to everyone. Yeah, all is fine. Crude's at $70 a barrel. Nothing to look at.
Yeah, very much unchanged. It's kind of like watching a slow motion bus wreck.
Well, it's just a bit boring, isn't it? I mean, I mentioned yesterday that, what's the range so far we've seen in March? A low of 68.33 and a high of, which is the first day of the month, 73.67. But I mean, that's a bit skewed because that sold off that day. I mean, if you're looking at the closing ranges though, on the 3rd of March, Brent closed at 71.62 and the lowest it's closed at has been 69.28. I mean, kill me now. Jeez, that's really boring.
I think the interesting thing here is to look at not only the fact that we've had this interesting change in flat price where we're biased more to a more lower flat price level, but still caught in a range. Let's say the
Yeah,
bottom of the range. We still have massive backwardation. If you look at the 12-month strip, it's still over $3,
yeah.
which tells you that the market is still trading geopolitical risk on a spread basis, and flat price is more of your supply and demand going meh.
Yeah.
I think the more interesting thing is the change that's happened in WTI, that U.S. Wonderful benchmark grade, where the structure in that market has almost collapsed to flat, if not going into contango.
Too much crude. Yeah, look, we've got, we wrote an article about this recently. I'll bring it up, but throughout the summer, we just see more TI in the market. I was talking to some trader mates at the weekend. I do have friends, not just Russ. I have real friends. No, he's a real friend. No, I was talking to a trader mate the other day who said that he thinks that the dated Brent pool, after this summer, will be the vast majority of it will be US crudes in that basket because it's got to have a home. It's got to have somewhere to go, and there's not the captive audience just in the States. They need to branch out into Europe. I think that Brent TI spread gets weaker and weaker, or
Well, I mean
probably
that
it's not
that that
the
has
way.
been the trade flow that we've seen for the better part of a couple of years now, where you have more and
Yeah,
more WTI moving into the Brent market. I think you're also seeing probably an impact of people positioning themselves for the potential increase in port fees for tankers going into the United States, because there are a fair amount of tankers that are Chinese made and operated by companies that have a predominant Chinese contract license with shipyards.
yeah.
And so you do have that uh, wonderful issue that's going to be coming up with the trade board, where the open comments are finished on March 25th and then the final ruling on April 17th. So you might see positioning, because if anything, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the TI complex if those port fees go up to $1 million a ship.
Is that going to happen?
I give it a high likelihood that something will happen. Maybe it won't be a million, maybe it'll be something different, but this was something that was started under the Biden administration due to the labor unions who work primarily with shipyards and the shipping unions complaining the
Yeah.
fact that China has a predominant strong position in the shipbuilding marketplace and has a competitive advantage due to support by the government. And so this has been an investigation going on for a better part of a year, and it kind of rolls into the Trump administration's tariff call. So
Yeah.
it is a highly likelihood, I would think, that something is going to happen. Now, will it be $1 million per port call? Don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Our break. There we go. Matty. He wrote about this on Friday. So here we go. Market trend. The US is considering new port fees targeted Chinese and Chinese-built vessels, which you just mentioned, could significantly impact freight rates, limited spare capacity. Yeah,
Well,
I don't
and
know.
there's
Look,
one other caveat in this that I think a lot of people missed is that there's also a sub thing where U.S. exports have to go on a percentage of U.S. flagged vessels. It starts off at a 1% going up to, I think, 15% in 5 years, which, when you look at the global tanker fleet, there aren't that many there aren't any VLCCs or Suezmaxes that are currently flagged U.S. flagged. I think anything that's flagged U.S. flagged is currently operating on the West Coast between Alaska and the U.S. West Coast on that cabotage trade from the Alaska pipeline.
okay, let me ask you this, and look, this is. I'll argue this is buried. We saw that unfortunate collision in the North Sea last week before,
Yeah,
where we saw the Stena Immaculate was hit by a
a
you
container
know
ship.
yeah, called the Solong, and it was I just wanted to talk about that because there's lots of sort of speculation and everyone getting all Daily Mail and all that kind of nonsense. Um, we covered it well because I mean that's literally our bag. But I just wanted to bring up this Stena Immaculate. Obviously, this is where she loaded 18 KT of jet. She's still at anchor as far as we've got. Yeah, she's stopped. I would have thought she's going into port or dry dock to get repaired. But look, just forget all that. Just we've got her. Let me just go into this. Well, let me refresh. Sorry, tech issues once again. Bear with me. Have you paid the internet bill? Yeah, of course she has. Info. Right, so she's got a US flag.
Yes.
Now, Stena are a Swedish company owned by the billionaire family up in Sweden. So talk to
Can I,
talk to
can
me.
I, can I stop you 1 second?
Yes.
Look at the country she was built in, though.
Okay. Yeah.
China.
Right. You talk to you say things now because I'm going to get in trouble.
Well, I mean, this is one of the aspects of this whole UTR trade trade remark is that you can reduce your likelihood of having an impact by reflagging vessels under the U.S. flag or making investments in U.S. port infrastructure. If you look at what happened with CGM-CMA, French container line, a lot of ships built in Chinese yards. Has a very large Chinese order book. What did they do to offset their potential exposure to this ruling? They went and said they're going to invest $20 billion in U.S. ports and U.S. infrastructure and build ships in a U.S. shipyard. So there is an offset that can be done to counteract your exposure to this rule.
Right.
Now, the problem you're going to have in reflagging ships from a foreign flag to the U.S. flag is that under a U.S. flag, you have to have U.S. officers and U.S. crew and a U.S. citizen crew, U.S. citizen officers. And I don't think there are enough licensed mariners under the U.S. flag to actually man a whole bunch of new ships that come under the U.S. flag.
Right. Okay. Okay. So and well, I know we're flirting with sensationalism a bit here, but okay, US flagged. That ship was carrying 19,000 tons of jet for the Military Sea Lift Command, right? Which is the
She
US
had more
government.
than 19,000 tons on board. She had, I
No,
think, about 5,000
don't,
tons on
don't argue with me with cargo tracking, mate. I'm all over you. She had 18 KT of Jet A1 on board based on her draft is. She's got a 9.7 meter draft. Anyway, so you've got US flagged vessel, US crew. I'm assuming they would have been US crew,
under a
carrying
long
jet.
term, under a time charter to Military Sea Lift Command.
Correct, through the ship operator Crowley, which are a big US shipping
Crowley. Yep.
company. Hit by a Russian master on a container boat that was about 15 miles off course, going at 16 knots. Yeah.
Actually, the history of that flow, that ship had always transited that way between Immingham all the way down to Rotterdam. So it was not doing anything outside of its normal operating parameters.
Interesting.
So first off, second off, um, it had left port heading to Rotterdam to discharge cargo on its normal cargo track, normal cargo routing.
Okay.
Um, and I do not want to jump into what happened, what could have happened. However, in my opinion, this is my opinion only. I'm not basing this on any information other than just what I think probably happened. You had a failure in the bridge watch. I don't think there was anything scurrilous that the master was Russian and the cargo was an American flag. Oh my God, I think that's just a bunch of hyperbole being put out for sensationalism.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with reality.
Okay. Hang on a second. Let's just pause a minute there, sailor, literally. Um, okay. Now the question that everyone's going to be asking, I want to pull this up because we've got here. Obviously we purchased a company called Marine Traffic a couple of years ago. And what they have is a rather splendid, let me open this. A rather splendid let me play this. Uh, we got a video basically of it. I can't share it with you because that's annoying. I can't share it with you because I'll get in trouble. But I mean, look, it's not like surely they would have seen that Stena Immaculate though. I mean, she did not veer off course.
If you had somebody who was standing a proper bridge watch, probably yes, because the Stena Immaculate was at anchor.
Okay. So it was your theory is that it's human error.
Yeah,
Okay. Fair enough.
I mean,
Let's leave that there.
I mean, there are many times because if you remember, not too recently off Singapore,
Yeah.
there was a very similar issue that happened. A tanker was struck by a dry cargo ship and caught fire.
Yeah, that was a Hafnia boat, wasn't it? Um,
Yes,
I forget which one it was, but it collided with, and then there was all this. It was a naphtha cargo as well. The Iranian naphtha, I think, might
yes,
have been on board. Yeah.
yes,
So it does happen, but
yes, it
people
does.
people like to, like you said, sensationalize it, get all Daily Mail. I would argue this though. Yes, it made a lot of news. It was front page BBC. It was unfortunate but good exposure for us with the marine traffic and the Kepler brand because we track where that ship is and we know what cargo's on board and etc. etc. News on it though seems like I understand news values wane over time, but it seems like it's been a bit buried. Is that just me, or would you argue that you have to look for it now? Unfortunately, one say a lot, one Filipino national crew member, he lost his life, which is very sad. And then we know that the Russian captain is being charged with gross negligence manslaughter and is currently under investigation.
Yeah.
But you have to search for the news, and if you
Well,
live in Yorkshire, it's pretty
it's no
important.
longer, I would say it's no longer a front page story because the accident happened. You had the collision, you had the explosion, you had the fire, you had the oil spill, and the master's been detained and arrested for improper management of the ship and for
Yeah,
manslaughter. I mean, so to me, that is the story.
that is the
Um,
story. Okay,
I
let's
mean,
talk.
I'm sure there are other people who have had access to the preliminary investigation. The U.S. Coast Guard is involved in the investigation because it is a U.S. flag vessel.
Yeah,
You've got the Portuguese maritime authorities. You've got the UK maritime authorities. So there's plenty of people investigating what has happened. I haven't seen anything about the black boxes being taken off the ship or the data around there. What was going on at that point? I'm sure there must have been a camera on the bridge, as most new ships have cameras on the bridge to monitor
yeah,
what the
yeah,
crew
yeah.
is doing. So I'm sure there's a lot of things that are not going to be out in the general press because most people in the general press have no clue what they're talking about when they start talking about maritime issues. Um,
Jesus.
they are completely clueless about what happens.
You're right, but I mean, that's what it's always these things. I think it's when something happens like this, unfortunately, when like an airline disaster happens, whatever, everyone's a kind of expert, aren't they? And everyone kind of got their opinion, and but a lot of them were wrong. You're right, but you know, a lot of the reaction was like, how can this happen this day and age with all this technology? But it does. I mean, it does happen. It's only so much you can do.
Ships collide on a regular basis. I might say regular basis. They happen. Ships collisions happen around the world all the time. And it usually calls down to either there's a failure in equipment or a failure in watch standing. And that's usually the root cause of a lot of collisions that happen. So, nevertheless, it's unfortunate that the accident, it's unfortunate that somebody lost their lives. You have pollution, you have all the other things that happen because of this
Yeah.
issue. That's why the master was arrested. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
is pretty much if you're the captain of a ship and you're involved in an accident like this, you most likely will be arrested.
This is the captain of your ship falling. Before we officially lose the plot, can we just clarify that you were at sea for how many years?
Well, between my cadet training years and ocean-going career, approximately 11 years.
There you go. He knows what he's talking about, the boy. Right, let's talk about other stuff now before we get into trouble. The Fed Day, happy Fed Day, but another boring one, right?
Oh, yeah, I think this will be, well, I think the big thing is going to be the discussion points with the Fed after the announcement. I think the world is expecting no change to U.S. interest rates.
Yeah.
But it's going to be what does Mr. Powell say during his press conference at 8:30 Central European time tonight.
Yeah.
That's going to be the big driving factor, I think, in how the market interprets what's going to happen. I think most people are now expecting that the U.S. Federal Reserve will not adjust interest rates at all in 2025. If not, there's a chance that they might go higher in 2025, maybe up 25 basis points. But any type of cut is probably off the table.
I agree with that. And I think, I don't know, look, I know we're sort of mocking and being a bit annoying about subdued markets, but I know that the dollar's been, weakened significantly against a basket of currencies over the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks. Equity markets, they've picked up a little bit in the last few days, but they're off, I think the Nasdaq's off around 10%, might be the Dow Jones as well. The Trump trade, people taking profit, I think. I mean, the market was on an absolute tear. And people are allowed to cash out. I heard that there were some guys who have dropped money, but of course that's going to happen. If someone makes money, someone's going to lose it somewhere. But I agree. I mean, just bringing it sort
Well,
of closer to home.
when you think about it, prior to the election, the Dow was trading right around 40,000.
Yeah,
And it rallied up to 45 post-election, and now we're coming right back to where it was pre-election.
right.
So to me, it's just people taking profit on the position on the Trump trade or
Yeah.
on the rally that happened because you had a Republican Congress and a Republican government. And whenever you have a peaceful transfer of power in the United States and you have an aligned government, if that government's pro-business, which the Republican Party typically is pro-business,
Mm.
that causes everybody to have a nice little rally.
Yeah.
And we've probably hit that point where people are starting to buy into the markets again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think
Um,
it's there's just sort of bring it close to home just a sec. The street that we live on, where I live in Dubai, it's a nice area. I like where I live. I love where I live, and we're very lucky. But there are at the moment, I'm just going to go out my window. There are one, two, three, four, five, 7 homes that are all being renovated because people have in Dubai, especially in the UAE, lots of people have moved here. Lots of people have sold up back in their home country and they've moved here and they've invested stuff here and they're renovating their homes. And it's good. It's good for the market. It's good for the street. Of course, it's a bit annoying when you got 400 people drilling all day. But I mean, we'll gloss over that because we did the same.
living in
So
a
I'm not.
dentist office.
Yeah, exactly. I'm guilty. I was guilty of it this time last year. But I think the world's kind of settled down. With 5 years now since that dreaded COVID, we were locked down and to get a doctor's or a police note to go and buy a loaf of bread. And I think you kind of had the recovery and then you kind of had more of a recovery and then you've had the Trump trade. And I think people now are kind of going, let's just chill for a little bit. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in markets right now.
Well, I think you're seeing I personally think you're seeing markets reacting to the global slowdown that's been going on since Q3 of last year. I mean, you've got a fairly um, benign market in China.
Mm.
China's trying to do everything they can to stimulate their economy, and it's not working. And that's the big growth engine that everybody keeps focusing on is Asia, China, because
Yeah.
that's the trade that has worked for the last 20 years. And I think people have to come to realization that China's not there to bail out the world. They've hit their peak. They're done. There's a lot of articles about peak China oil demand, peak China consumer oil demand, not necessarily key peak energy demand, but
Mm.
also you look at the other things that China is doing, i.e., they're slowing down their steel manufacturing, which is not a sign, in my opinion, of robust growth to come. I mean, you don't stop producing raw materials if you think the market is going to come your way and you're going to need to keep building and keep doing things.
Well,
One of the
I mean,
big interesting stories I see outside of the oil market is the fact that the steel markets are getting flooded, and you see a lot more protectionist tariffs coming into play to stop the flow of Chinese steel into various markets. I mean, everybody focuses on the US and Trump, but everybody forgets there's a lot of other places in the world that have thrown tariffs up, and they're not so much retaliatory tariffs against Trump
yeah.
and what he's doing.
I mean, look, just on that, I mean, it's a valid point because, I said we covered the China demand story multiple times last year, right? We covered it in diesel demand we see starting to drop off. It's plateaued. Gasoline demand as well. Dare I say it? I'm looking at Chinese electric car on Saturday.
Oh,
Don't.
BYD.
No, it's not. It's called a Li.
Okay.
Called a Li. It's very nice. Anyway, shoot me now. But I mean, yeah, it's
Welcome to the club, my friend. Welcome to the club.
yeah, but you buy American. 10.8 million barrels a day, March 2025. I mean, that's the highest since October 2023. Should we see where it's coming from?
Let me guess.
Uh,
Russia, Venezuela, Iran.
what have we got here? March, Iraq. So who's the highest? Um, Saudis, then Iraq, then Russia, and then Iran. So, I mean, you could argue where were Russia? Let's go back March 2024. Russia were 1.7, March 1.64, roughly the same. Where were they?
Well, what's
December
more in
1.1.2. Um, so you can see, January, February, March, suddenly another 400,000 barrels a day China are buying. And you could argue, is that them coming in? Are we talking lead time now, prior Jan 10 sanctions coming on?
You're probably seeing that, in my opinion, because when you had the wind down period, it took you all the way to March 15th, or I'm sorry, March 12th. So you could see that, and that's what you've seen happen. But you also have to remember that there are a lot of government to government deals that the Chinese are still going to allow to flow that the U.S. sanctions will not impact. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll figure out other ways of making oil move. And I think they've already done that because if you look in your February data you had that there was a big slowdown in February.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you can tie that into Chinese New Year, you can tie that into whatever, but that's when everybody was trying to, there were a lot of stories about ships stopping, loaded tankers sitting off port, nowhere to go, nobody's accepting the cargoes, and then all of a sudden those cargoes started to move again.
Yeah.
So to me, it just took a couple of weeks for people to figure out what they could do to circumvent the new sanctions regime, get those implemented, and things started moving once again.
Yeah, and they start to draw on inventories. I mean, look, there's so much to cover at the moment, and this is what quite like about all markets. There's so much going on, and there's lots of interesting points to talk about on your favorite energy podcast, The Smoking Barrel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. But largely, if you look at markets and you kind of looked at your phone, you'd be like, oh yeah, same stuff, different day. Nearly swore then. But anyway, look, before we jump off, what else have we got? Fed Day, nothing's going to happen there. OPEC are not meeting for a while. They're going to bring back oil in April. I think the next meeting's in June.
The next official meetings in June, but you'll still have the monthly JMCC meetings,
Yeah, yeah,
checking compliance, what have you. And if they're not going to make any rash decisions, it won't be till June. And I think, in my opinion, you'll see probably a freezing of any more releases because the market's just going to become saturated.
Well, you said it though. I mean, the markets are based on where structure is trading, and I'm still bullish summer structure on Brent. I still think that's got a long way to go. If you look at, say, a June SEP spread, that's worth around a buck 40 right now. Buck 20 right now. I think that could go to $2. Seasonality, Europe needs to, the supply and demand deficit in Europe is always around about 2 million barrels a day deficit. I think OPEC, it was the right time. I think they just need to see what data looks like Q1. But I'm not allowed to talk about OPEC.
I think OPEC's gonna have a rude awakening, and they're gonna have to rescind what they said they were going to do because
No,
I don't think they can
I'm not
bring
having
the
this
oil back into
conversation.
the market.
I'll get in trouble. La 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 la.
I think the demand is not going to be as robust as everybody wants to think it's going to be. I think that the world is at a point where peak oil is, peak consumer oil consumption is happening. I think the story of petchems is a bit overdone, and I don't think the petchem market is going to be as strong. And that not going to be the big driver of growth because you've got a lot of places where petchems are being killed and that's just not going to be a way it's going to happen because you have to have good manufacturing data in order to stimulate petchem production because you need those products to produce goods. And if nobody's buying goods, then you don't need the naphtha and you don't need the petchem.
Sorry, I had
And
you
you
on
don't need
mute.
the
What did you say?
plastics.
I had you on mute. What did you say? What he said. I don't know what he said. Market's just taken an absolute dive. Where are we now? End of the trading window, 12:47, 19th of March. We were trading $70.40 about 15 minutes ago. Now we're below 70 on Brent. So, yeah, moved that on very quickly, didn't I? Anyway, look, I have to depart you, love you, and leave you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I don't know what's happened in oil markets.
Something must have happened because that's a massive move in the
That
last
is a
5 minutes.
let me just share that this one so to give some context. You can see here. This is where we kind of smoking barrel started here, and then it's
Obviously,
closed.
somebody heard my rant around petchem.
Yeah, probably, or maybe I'm not going to say the word. But yes, look, that's what's happening. So look, good to see you next week. Yes, and then we've got the Eid celebrations. So there won't be one at the end of March, and then I'm going to be in Cape Town the week after. But anyway, let's chat next week.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much. Click, comment, like, subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn. Pick up your latest, and if you have any issues and any wants and any needs to discuss and comment, text to us directly. We're there.